My name is Amritya Singh, and I am your moderator for today's negotiation session. My role throughout this session, through the course of the 90 minutes, is will be purely facilitative, and I shall commit to be neutral and unbiased, so that this session can be an opportunity for both the parties to reconcile your differences and mutually come to an amicable solution. Now, with that being said, if both the parties agree, I would like to invite the calling party first, followed by the responding party for your opening remarks.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Leo Yin, the CEO of DataFest. Just briefing you about my position today. Firstly, I'd like to address the concerns of the Razadi government in this case that are primarily, basically, you can say data security and safeguarding the privacy. Apart from it, I'll tell you that at this point of time, I'm taking into account the exponential and the holistic manner to arrive not only at the cost benefit analysis so that it is beneficial for both the parties, but also the cause and effect that has caused because of such a situation that have arrived till now. So that cause and effect situation I'll just enumerate briefly. So the economy of Razad is affected because of the booyah that has been banned because of certain apprehensions that the government has shown, and we hope that this ban gets uplifted today with cooperation and dialogue that we go through the negotiation, and we hope that this happens in order to negotiate the future of Booyah in Razad. Apart from it, we clearly assure you that any of the data is not accessible to Iranian government on our part, and this is the word of the CEO of the Data Fest, and I truly commit to that, and we assure you in any regard that there has been no breaches that has happened. Apart from it, I like to tell you that the economy of Razad has also been mentioned in a reference by the economist, that how there has been a sense of impending doom and there are some social unrest. Just to acknowledge the facts that has been currently happening in Razad, I'd like to enumerate this point that there is a need at this point of time that we need to consider the welfare and the aspirations of the people of Razad itself. Apart from it, there are also foreign investing other companies that are from Elenia that have shown certain reservations in various regards in itself, regarding because of the fact that there has been no proper communication channels in that regard. And also, I'd like to firstly, at this point of time, there were this kind of sense I can tell you that there is a kind and a prompt reason that prompted the other side, that is the honorable officials, to take such a move of such a gravity. And I'd like to ask that briefly, if you could just in a brief summarization, you could tell us what was those reasons in your opening remark itself. So that was one of the questions that I'd like to pose. Moreover, my position and my interest, particularly dealing with the upliftment of the ban, will be my primary concern. Secondly, in regards to the cooperation that we want to build with Razadi government, we definitely wish to talk about various security issues that has been involved in the present scenario, as I've already started my speech with the very same. Also, I really wish to see that how we cooperate in this regard, and I wish that we reach an amicable solution today. Now, I'd like Mr. Shikhar, who is an expert in the field, in this field, to state his position.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leo. Greetings to everyone present here. I welcome you all in this meeting, which has been convened by Mr. Leo, and we are really admired by the presence and approval of Mr. Bahuguna in this meeting and approval of his to this negotiation. We're really thankful to you that you approved of this negotiation. I'm the counsel of Mr. Leo, Shikhar Panwar. You can address me as Shikhar. As you have heard from Mr. Leo, his expressions and his unequivocal, expressions insinuate that he is asking for just one thing, which is to get back his app in the Razardian market, but keeping in mind the interest of Razardian government. As a council, when I see this app, I can see that this app is transcending all the differences, providing a common platform for lakhs of underprivileged and unentitled lot, which cuts through the shackles of caste, creed, ethnicities, abilities, and social classes in this strata-based society of Razard. Not only this, but this app has also democratized the internet, with millions of people using the same platform with their different expressions, with their different languages. What can be a better example of democracy in this whole world that can be seen from this app? Mr. Bahuguna, we are really obliged to you that you approved of this negotiation and you didn't opt for any other method in the terms of adversarial litigation. You didn't go for that, which in a way clearly insinuates, unequivocally insinuates that how you wanted to capitalize the interest of cooperation, synergy, and symbiosis of both the parties present here on this table. In view of this, I realized that this matter has potential legal backdrop, which as a council, I would suggest the other side's council that we should not get into the ins and outs of this legal dimension. That should be favorable for both the parties. Talking about myself, as a lawyer, I care for three things: responsibility, risk management, and cooperation. And one more, there is legitimacy. And these are the principles which I shall make sure that these three principles are getting pervaded over in the whole session of this negotiation. Nevertheless, my role would be utterly advisory in nature, and I shall ensure that my client, that is Mr. Liao, who is getting affected better than anyone, shall be in a position to make his own decisions independently. Lastly, about the interests which stems up from the position of Mr. Liao, I would say we have just three interests. Key interests, I would term them as resigning of the ban, which has been imposed by the government of Razad. For that, we shall, through cooperation, through dialogues, we shall try to come to the conclusion of it, and we shall ensure that this ban gets resigned or revoked. Secondly, shifting of servers from the country of Singapore to the country of Razad and redefining its security standards. Thirdly, when this app comes back into the market of Razad, we shall be seeking some tax rebate on it, since you know our financial situation is not that up to the mark. Therefore, these are the three key interests from our side, and I shall be trying to listen, and I shall be very eagerly listening to the other side's interest. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful statement and an elaborate clarification on what all needs and interests are there on the part of other side. I'd like to wish, first of all, a very good evening to everybody present here. And I would like to, again, as my learned friend on the opposite side has also welcomed all of us here, I would also like to welcome everybody to this negotiation session. My name is Rhythm Kataria. I am the attorney on behalf of my client, the federal government of Razad, which is being represented by Mr. R.S. Bahuguna. Mr. Bahuguna, who is accompanying me here today, is the Honorable Minister for Electronics and Information Technology and has been serving in the Razadian cabinet headed by Honorable Prime Minister Dr. Mr. Dhansher Vikram Singh. At the very outset, I would like to take this opportunity to thank both of you, the council as well as Mr. Yin, if I may address you as that, uh, for agreeing to resolve the impending dispute through the negotiation process. And I appreciate both of you taking your time out, especially considering the different time zones that we are in, and also, amidst the health crisis that we are going through. I hope you're all keeping safe and healthy. All thanks to the technology that these days that enables us, to resolve the disagreements in a virtual setting. Having said that, I'd like to clarify my capacity here, as my learned friend on the opposite side also clarified his authority. Um, as an attorney, I am only here in an advisory role, and I shall be dealing with the technicalities, the semantics of the proposals that we lay here on the table today. The power to accept or reject an offer shall wholly rest with my client. We would also like to clarify that my client has been empowered by the Honorable PM to enter and enforce any sort of agreement that we reach here. Under normal circumstances, at this stage, I would have presented a non disclosure agreement. However, given the situation and in the interest of time, I have requested my secretary to mail the same to you, Mr. Attorney, Mr. Shekhar, so that we can obtain your client's digital signature. You can peruse the provisions thoroughly on the email and revert me with the document duly signed, if that is comfortable to you. Uh, Before we approach the dispute at hand, let's build a framework and set some ground rules so that there is a constructive and conducive dialogue between both the parties. Building trust is one of our primary agendas going into this meeting, and we believe Mr. R.S. Bauguna agreeing to meet and agreeing to settle the dispute is itself complementing the fact that we want to establish trust between both the parties. For reaching an effective solution which is beneficial for both of us and which takes into consideration both of our interests, there will be a need to gather some information and share some information at different intervals, which will involve posing questions to your client. If I may pose, or Mr. Bahuguna may pose direct questions, if you do not have any problem, Mr. Attorney, we would like to pose questions to Mr. Leo Yin directly, if you do not have a problem. Which will involve posing questions to your client about the various details so that we can formulate an offer which is workable solution for both of us. It goes without saying that we shall restrict ourselves from speaking over and in between each other in order to formulate a conducive conversation. Lastly, it is very important that we discuss every agenda that we have on hand individually and moreover only one at a time, so that there is clarity on the offer proposed by both the parties, which will eventually lead us to a better resolution. Moving towards an effective resolution and having heard Mr. Yin at length, I believe there is also a need to address what my client is agreed with and what is his side of the story and what are the ground realities that led us to where we are today. It is my client who is in the best position to lay bare the facts, and for that, I'd like him to take this forward. Mr. Bauguna, why don't you take it forward from here?
Thank you so much, Ritan. Thank you for that wonderful introduction from the calling party as well. I won't take up much time of this session, as I understand that there are far more important things to address and far more important things to negotiate. But on the onset of it, I do have a few remarks that I would like to lay out before we start. And before that, like an absolute remark with the idea on the the quality of application that Mr. Leo Yin and his company produces. I think I've personally enjoyed that application a lot, and I absolutely love the features that it brings about. But at the same time, we also value the economic prospects that your company brings into Resart and the kinds of opportunity it provides to the individuals that live within it. I completely appreciate the amount of effort that the company presses into in democratizing the entire internet idea that Mr. Attorney has spoke about. But at the same time, what's absolutely concerning at this stage is that as soon as we came across the report on our side on our side, we realized that there was certain amount of processing of data which had certain amount of dubiousness in it. This dubiousness did not truly address the nature as to why and how is this data being processed, but rather what we could gather is that there is profiling and mining taking place of the similar data. We think that this absolutely poses a great risk with respect to the national security. And as much as I care about this cutting through, the barriers of caste and barriers of class, I think it's absolutely necessary for the citizens to understand that their right to privacy and their ability to express themselves in a safe manner also takes precedence over all these things. We understand and we look forward to Mr. Leo Yin proposing any kind of proposals that he has which could directly address the kind of problems he has with respect to the processing of the data. We are also looking forward to discussing how localization works, but towards the end of the day, I hope that towards the end of the day, we are able to walk away with this table with a solution in hand which is mutually beneficial to both of us. Over to you, Rhythm. Rhythm, you're muted.
I'm really sorry. Just the technology things. It's very new for me as well. Thank you for that elaborate statement, Mr. Bahuguna. We observe that there are quite a bit of differences between the parties, and it will be my client's effort to address and resolve each one of them. So I'd like to reassure Mr. Yin and Mr. Shekhar about the same. talking about the proposals and moving forward, setting the negotiation ball rolling, we have formulated a 3-point agenda which we think is absolutely necessary to be negotiated on. We shall discuss each agenda at a time. If you find the agenda to be a common ground for both of us, we can discuss and move forward with that first, if that is agreeable to Mr. Shekhar and Mr. Yin. The first point and the primary point that we have on hand is about securing the data of Rezardian citizens, and also about the localization of data. These 2 points are intertwined between each other, and we would like to discuss the same at that first at length, if you are comfortable with the same, Mr. Shekhar and Mr. Yin.
Just to add on to that, I'd like to clarify then when at this point of time we are discussing that we'll be shifting servers and localization of data along with security issues in itself, that somewhere implies the fact that ultimately we are looking forward to uplifting of the ban and reinstating our app back in the market. So that is something that is implied from the very statement. So if we are clear and have same lines on that, we definitely wish to go ahead with that.
Surely, Mr. Bahuguna, if you have something to clarify there.
Right. As I have explained earlier as well, we completely understand the interests of the importance of the company that Mr. Leo Yin runs, and we understand that this is absolutely necessary for us to come to a solution which ends up lifting of the ban. But at the same time, the request still stands, and the trade-off still is on the table. That if localization and other our requirements are fulfilled, the ban will definitely be uplifted, and the mechanics of the same will be discussed during the course of this discussion. Thank you so much. Over to you, Rhythm, if you have something.
Thank you. Coming to the point of data localization and addressing the privacy concerns of our citizens, the first point that we have to put across the table, and this is intertwined. Please bear with me if I go to 30 seconds long. I believe the first point that we had is we would want the Data Fest Limited to relocate its servers in the country of Rezardia, especially those data servers that store Rezardian citizens' data. So we would want the first point in contention and going forward is that we would want to relocate as immediately as possible. If Mr. Yin can give us some insights on that, so that I can move to the intertwined agenda that we have with respect to that.
I certainly revere and respect whatever you have in place, but you also have to bear with me and my counsel in going in certain details about the very same aspect, because it is not something that we can do just at a point of time. This is something that is a very lengthy procedure in itself. So you have to give it some time. Then we will be moving on to the next sub agenda or sub interest that you have at hand. If that works for you, I'll be clearing my position on the very same.
Certainly go forward with the data localization aspect that you want to address.
Yeah, so since we've come directly to it, so data localization is something that the government wants, and we are also appreciative of the fact that we can shift the servers at this point of time, but there are certain considerations that have to be kept in mind. Since it's a lengthy procedure, it is not something that can be done tomorrow or in a month itself. But I like to give you could say that those servers in Singapore itself, because of some of the technological advancement that not some of the we know how much Singapore has been technologically advanced in this field, and the various other services that is provided by the Singapore itself. But since Rezardian has grown we really want that at this point of time the installation cost itself should be borne by both the parties, so that there can be a workable solution in this regard. Apart from it, I like to add on, if the government is ready to borne some installation cost, there comes a kind of incentives that we like to put forth. But before that, we'd like to hear the government side, and please, if you could, if Shikhar has to add something to it.
Certainly. I really like the enthusiasm which the other party is showing today, and I'm thinking that the whole process of this negotiation might get carried on without my involvement also. But that's fine if at the end we want solutions to be worked out. And for the solutions, when I talk about the monetary aspect of it, to which we are not in a situation that we ourselves install those, or I should say, reallocate those data servers from Singapore to resort by our own self. That's the reason we are here today. We ask you that how much of you can bear the cost of it, because we are at such a financial status that I think 30% of the whole infrastructure building which it requires can be borne by us. And as we know, you are a rising economy, rising country also. You are having a infrastructure of your own. Technology are getting built up, are getting decked up day by day. So I realized that this would, in other way, give employment to your own countrymen also, residing citizens, if once that data center gets settled there. So I was just thinking that if we can have 70 to 30% breakout, in which 30% can be borne by us and 70% is coming from your side. How about this, Mr. Voguna?
Indeed. I'll be going these entire concerns one by one, and then we'll discuss what's necessary in them. All right. Starting with the idea of time considerations, I just want to establish here a few line of dialogue in that point. I don't want to like elaborate, discussions and the reasoning why you want this time. I just want a specific figure and how much time do you think this is necessary, and then we'll retort like depending on how much we expect will be reasonable.
Before that, I'd like to tell you that normally this process involves kind of from 1 year to 2 years. Approximately this amount of time is required in shifting and reallocating of servers. So this is the approx time that any server that has to be reallocated requires.
Right. All right. So since we've come to that, let's address the elephant in the house. The problem is that we are still trying to say that we are still have a problem with the processing, what is happening, and everything that is going around behind the way that data is being collected, and all these things are happening around. The problem at this point, even if you agree to shifting of this data, is still not being addressed. The way that the data is being processed, and basically what is happening between the Singapore, like the Singapore government and the Alien government and all that jazz, we'll address that later. But immediately, even if it takes 1 or 2 hours, 1 year or 2 year to conclude the entire transaction process, and things getting to the normal, I still don't understand how this is really solving the problem, which is to say that the immediate privacy violation we are trying to address. Even if this happens for the 1 year, we still have that violation continue to be going on. I mean, even if that time is true, but that time is not addressing some of our largest concern at hand.
If
Any
Mr.
take on that?
Bahuguna allows, I'll just like to add a small bit of information to what Mr. Bahuguna has said, and Mr. Yin can, respond after that. So one bit of information which is of prime contention to us is, and prime importance to us, is that our foreign minister and our diplomats in the country of Singapore has informed us that there is talks going between the Singapore nation and the Alanian nation about establishing a comprehensive data and information sharing agreement between them. However, if you say that you will share the data, I mean relocate the data servers in a time of 1 to 2 years, that is not essentially solving the problem, because if the data and the agreement goes through before that, the privacy of our individuals is at high risk, and we cannot afford that. Mr. Yin, if you could understand that.
Yeah, I totally get you from where you. I totally get you from where you come from. Sorry, because there were some disturbances in the back. Sorry for that. So, we were, as my counsel has already stated in this regard, we have twin issues in this regard. Firstly, reallocation of centers, and secondly, redefining the security. So I think we should firstly, if you're pressing the point, we can discuss the security aspect first. So I'll just take some of your time, and then my counsel can elaborate the structure in this regard. So what we definitely need cooperation from the government side in any of the thing that we propose you today itself. So the servers have to be, what we are thinking is of the fact that there will be a strong threshold that we've thinking of establishing a firewall network in this regard, that will be managed by a data data-based administration. So you all know that there are two types of administration for any of the firewall mechanism to work, that is system administration and the database administration. So the basic concern for the government is the database administration in this regard. So we want the government should have a supervisory role in this regard. That is what we've seen from the intentions of the government. That is what government is expecting of us. So we definitely like to offer in that database administration. We'll be having, and my council will be elaborating what all the members will be and what sort of confidentiality to be maintained, and that is something I'll stay away from, I can tell you. So apart from it, I'll just briefly sum up what all will be required in that firewall arrangement that we are thinking of. But before that, I think my council should tell you the framework, and then I'll get back to the very same.
Surely. So, as far as this whole framework is concerned, a firewall shall get constructed, which in a software sense, I would say, if we may talk legally and in technical language, by which a committee shall be formed. This committee is something which is database administration, working under this. And this administration, when works, is having some 6 members team. I think 3 would be from the side of this Booyah app or DataFest, and 3 from the side of government. So that transparency should get maintained. Accountability is also another factor in that. These 6 peoples of administration would try to have an access over this whole framework. Even the 3 people who are working in Resort can have their access from remote place also. That is, they don't have to go from Resort to Singapore just for this sake. They can have this. And this system is so efficient that it can handle everything. Every malware which is getting, trying to enter the boundaries, this will get addressed by this whole framework. On these lines, I think this was some of it. And if possible, confidentiality has to be maintained. We will ask those 3 government officials to sign an NDA, that is non-disclosure agreement, since the data is getting involved in it. And we also don't want that our users' data is getting breached by anyone else apart from us. That's the whole reason behind this NDA. So if Mr. Liao may continue.
Yeah, just briefly, I'll tell you and sum up in some regards. So basically the firewall rules mechanism has already been elaborated. So basically the function will be the network scans and the ICP scans to strengthen the security in this regard, and that was something the concern of the government at this point of time. Moreover, we've seen that there are various cases that there are some attempts, failed login attempts, and this is how the data is breached and transfer of data happens. So we've been working on the policy, and we've come out with the very fact that accounts that have maximum login attempt that we allow will be automatically be notified to the database administration in itself, to which government can have direct access. But there is a prime condition in this regard, that is the data and this database administration will only be workable in cases in which resident citizens are involved. So the jurisdiction for the very same will be only in the resident area itself. That was something from our end, and we wish and we are open to any sort of recommendations from your side.
Right. If I could take on, there are a few clarifications that I wanted to make with respect to the proposal that have been put forward to. I think that there are a few discrepancies which seem very dubious in general, and I just wanted to clear them out. So the database administration that we are referring to in this immediate aspect, is it just during the process of transferring it from the 1-year transition period, or is it something that will continue after the database has been shifted to Resort? A brief answer would be really appreciated.
Yeah. So this is something that depends upon the decision of the government, but it will be maintained for 1 or 2 years time period that we'll require. But in the Resardian jurisdiction, that is something that has to be thought upon and can be worked upon by both the parties.
All right. So with respect to that, I think that the supervision must continue even post that reallocation has happened with respect to that. At the same time, with respect to the idea of processing information, I think with respect to the database that you're addressing, is it just merely the initial stage of data, or as we say, the primary data, or is it metadata that we're talking about with respect to the trends that might get, as an outcome might come about after the processing takes place? What kind of data are we addressing here?
Yeah, I totally get you in this regard. So we have a kind of structure in this regard. I'll tell you just briefly about that. So there are some sort of restricted data that a user also do not allow that he or she wish to share. But if the government concerns regards to the national security or something like that, and in regards to the policy, we definitely have to comply to those regards, and we definitely like to maintain and disclose only at this point of time. And that was the very fact that Shikhar has mentioned you about the NDA.
Indeed. Which then concludes me to the idea that we are okay with giving control to the government with respect to the metadata that probably comes out after processing.
I'll just point out, we have certain reservations in this regard and certain conditions that has to be processed before we come up to the conclusion that you can be given access. So that conditions has to be that this is something that is very emergent for the government, and concerns are in regards to extreme concerns, that is as you mentioned, that national security. So that extreme concerns will be taken care firstly, and in second regard, the use of restricted data and the access to that data, if government asks for any other reasons apart from it, we'll be having some reservations in that regard, because the privacy policy itself mentions and ensure the users for the very same.
All right. Just last point of clarification, then I think Rhythm might be having something to say. We'll move ahead to that. All right. What I still don't understand from this entire idea is that even though there exists some reservation, I still can't find the rationale behind why this reservation exists in the first place. I think this is the necessary conditions that we're talking about, and I think this is the exact reason why we're here in the first place. To understand why does this reservation even exist in the first place, since the data of the citizens who actually exist in this country are being governed or are being regulated with respect to freedom by the government itself. So a state does have certain amount of regulatory measures when it comes to that. With respect to the idea of reservations, I need to know that why does metadata is being put into the idea of reservation, and if possible, if it can be traded off, then we definitely think that giving us the entire control along with metadata will be a good thing. Secondly, just a moment, if you may bear with me. Thank you. Secondly, I think like there is a few comments that Rhythm has to make. Then we'll move on to yours. If Rhythm, please take over.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bahuguna. I believe the first sense of coming, like I've been hearing a lot of tech conversations going from Mr. Bahuguna and Mr. Shekhar and Mr. Yin right now. What I believe is the first and primary importance for us is topmost priority is privacy of citizens of Rezard, right? And addressing the same, you've told us that it will take around 1 to 2 years to relocate the servers into the country of Rezard and a lot of other things. However, what we wish to secure from you, and a commitment or any sort of agreement from you, that first of all, before the agreement between Singapore government and the Lenient government goes through, because that is of our prime importance. Because if that government, I mean, if that agreement goes through between both the parties, then our privacy, I mean, the privacy of our Rezardian citizens will be at risk and will be at high risk, and we do not want to enter into any sort of landscape like that, right? So before the agreement goes through, we would want the relocation task to be completed in the first place, and that is what we would require. Second is with respect to what has been alleged. I mean, we've received many reports, many complaints from various sources about sharing of information by Mr. By DataFest Limited to the Lenient government. We would require a thorough investigation of the data servers in Singapore of DataFest Limited, which secures the data of Rezardian citizens. We would require a thorough investigation of the same by our officials, so that we can satisfy ourselves that there has been no, as you've repeatedly told us, that there is no data share or data leak on your part. So we would want to assure ourselves and assure our military intelligence, a lot of intelligence agencies, that there has been no such thing happened. So for that, we would require one essential requirement is a thorough investigation of the same. Thank you. If you could, comment on this.
Surely. Thank you for that concern. I would just like to ask you, first of all, the standard time of reallocating a data center from one country to another country is in itself is an Herculean task. That's the standard time which is required for that. That is 1 year to 2 years in the middle of it. Secondly, during the meantime, while this ban is not getting revoked, how about this? we go for an investigation. Investigation is completed from your end, and that clearly means that how this whole suspicion which is you arising this app, we try to subdue that, and that can only be done that by investigation. We mean that a committee is formed, your members are going to Singapore data center, and they are trying to check up on that. Is that fine? Because I think for the whole time while this ban is not getting revoked, this will take a lot of time, and in itself it will be a loss for your own economy and for us as well. Therefore, if not a committee, it can be something in which you have your own methods by which you can just ask for our how to go about that. If you may
I can
suggest.
respond on your proposal of, forming the committee and getting the investigation done. We are really appreciative of the fact that, you're taking into consideration and taking into your stride that, an investigation is needed to placate the several suspicions that have surfaced in the past 1 year or so. So we believe the committee of, different military intelligence agencies and other intelligence agencies, we would want that committee to be formed and, sent to Singapore to, do a thorough investigation of the data servers of Rezardian citizens, the data that has been kept there. So first that, and with respect to the ban getting revoked, I believe the best possibility and the best possible scenario that we go forward with is that once the report of these of the committee comes through, we will definitely, if the report is not adverse, we will definitely go forward and revoke the ban. And also, my client Mr. Bahuguna has something to add here.
Right.
I just want a few clarifications in this regard.
Indeed. Please go ahead.
So the investigation you've mentioned, we really wish to inquire the time period required in this regard, and the backdrop of we really wish that the app should come back to the market as soon as possible, because it is our prime interest. So in the backdrop of the investigation, we really wish that for the temporary period, or you could advise any of the solution to revoke the ban, because we've already proposed you how we're going to ensure the security. Also, as the question that was asked by Mr. Bahuguna in the regard of that why we necessarily, if you could just repeat that question, I'll just answer in a minute, because it all went through.
With respect to what specific part are you discussing it, Mr. Leo? There were several questions that were posed. Mr. Leo, if you could apprise us what the specific core issue of the question was.
Yeah, I was asking in regards to the question that you've posed me before the start of Mr. Counsel from both the sides have started. You've asked me a question in regards to the need. So I just want to if you could repeat the question for me, I'll just clarify in a moment.
Indeed. All right. So since I have the stage to address this thing, I'll firstly let go of the questions, which is to say that the question I was asking was, why do you think that there exists a reservation when it comes to metadata in the first place? Why do you think that this specific reservation must exist? And if there is, unless and until not a very compelling necessity for it, we think that we need it because it's not just merely about addressing the ability or the ability to access that data. It's also about knowing what information is being concluded out of that data, so we are better able to address the misuse of the same. And if you could tell me about the reservations, and then I have some questions.
Yeah. I've already posed you the question, and I hope that you'll answer that in future. But answering to your question, we know that how Rizad is a democratic country, and something government already in supervisory capacity is something that can't be foreseen by a private company. But we've given a leverage in this regard, and coming to terms in this regard, and giving government the access is something that is that a few of citizens could comply with, because the privacy policy in regards to restricting data, that restricted data is in regards that their data will never be shared. So the suspicions and our reputation will be at stake at some point of time. But we've already told you that we'll be cooperating in any of the regards if the concerns are as emergent as national security. But we can definitely work on other regards if we are up to it. We can work on this, but I think that would suffice for my answer, and I've already posed some of the questions in the investigation regard. So if you can carry from that.
Right. I think that definitely satisfied our understanding of what the company comes on the table with. I understand that you're also secured about your reputation when it comes to how people perceive how secure you are when it comes to their data, and we are definitely sure when it comes to that. But at the same time, since we're not truly getting the idea of metadata and we're not really able to understand what this data is being interpreted as, where this data is probably being going to be used, and will only be available to us in selective locations, I think that our ability to address national security threat is already constrained in this manner. So at the same time, we'll be addressing few more things in the similar manner, but our counter proposal in the same line will be on the similar ideas, which is to say that assuming that this deal goes through, ban gets lifted, post the entering of app into the market, there are few things that we wanted you to address imminently as soon as this happens. Firstly, with respect to reinstatement of workers that have been laid off during the pandemic in the first place. Secondly, their marginal or depending upon what you understand to your best of your financial acumen, increase in their employment wages, but also addressing the idea that to a certain extent this deal also benefits them and in other aspects as well. If we have a bit of understanding on that, if
Yeah,
Radhan has to say.
just before that, Mr. Bogino, I really wish to, before we move on to that concerns, can we have a consensus in regards to the security of the data, then reallocation, then we'll be coming on to that. And before that, I really want that we finish just one of those
Right.
issues, and then second, and then we can move on to that.
Right,
We'll
right.
definitely have a word on that.
Right. So I think what we are right now at a conclusion is that sure, we understand that if this entire deal with respect to if you are okay with the look, when in this entire process that you have provided to us with respect to two things. Firstly, with respect to the time that you are asking, and secondly, with respect to the control that you're giving. I think with respect to the question of control, we are okay with the amount of reservations that you have, and we think that it's necessary to you to also give the space to be able to maintain your image in the market. We're completely fine with it. But secondly, the idea of time is still not being addressed and is still not being discussed to its finality. If this deal has to be taken into consideration, I think one of the aspects have been determined that we are okay with the considerations that you have put forward with, but time has to be discussed again. If I
Yeah,
may take the stage to address my concerns for the time, therefore we can move ahead with what problems times address. If I may, Mr. Leo.
yeah, sure, go ahead.
Indeed. Right. So the time constraints that the client part, the claiming party is talking about is respect to 1 or 2 years. But at the same time, even if no matter how much control we do have with respect to the data transfer that you're talking about, the creation of the committee and creation of this database administration, towards the end of the day, the data servers are still in the territorial jurisdiction of Singapore, which means that assuming the deal goes through and Singapore coerces or to a certain extent becomes directly liable to provide that data to Alanian government, that directly sabotages all our interests, and the idea of committee and idea of providing, the database administration largely falls flat. The problem still remains unless and until this thing is not, in an absolutely specific and absolutely fast manner. This is not truly addressing the true, the need of the hour. Mr. Leo,
Uh,
if I
yeah,
have just one thing, if Rhythm has something to say, then we can definitely understand what Mr. Leo has to say. Rhythm,
Just with
over to you.
respect to the clarification that we've agreed on, you giving us control of the data and a restrictive control. I believe it must be clarified time and again that even after it is done in Razadian countries, we shall continue to enjoy the supervisory role that we had during the Singapore data that was established there. So even after relocation, we would want to have that kind of supervisory role in the data servers in the country of Razadia as well. That's what one clarification was there. Mr. Leo, please go ahead.
If I may just add on
Yeah,
to it,
please.
I think we are having some diverse interest, yet we have clarified the whole issue, but there are some discrepancies occurring again and again. Firstly, first issue was that resigning of data of this app should take place. From the other side, it was a contention that once the data servers get shifted to Razad, then only the shift of PAN will take place. Am I right?
I believe there is a
Right.
miscommunication on that part. Yeah, Mr. Boguno, please go ahead and
Right.
address it.
I think there has been some misunderstanding in the necessity that we sit here in the position with. Definitely, we do have one of our concerns with respect to shifting of data, but the second and the most integral part of the same concern says that this should be done as soon as possible. With
yeah,
respect to the
Agree.
fact that is going through, with that has to be addressed. Mr. Shekhar, if Rhythm has to say,
Right.
then Mr. Shekhar can
Yes.
take over and continue.
The second part of Mr. Shikhar's statement that the ban will be lifted only once the data servers get relocated. Our understanding is a bit different in that sense. We wouldn't want to get you into the market and ameliorate the economy of Razad. Taking 1 or 2 years as you've proposed, I believe that is not a time frame that we've agreed on. But considering your proposal that 1 or 2 years will be taken to relocate data, we would want to get the app, your wonderful app, into the Razadian market before that. But what we proposed is, after the thorough investigation goes on and after the reports come in, we will definitely revoke the ban if the report is not adverse. I am also making a contingency here that the report should not be adverse and there should not have been any leakage or data sharing on your part. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally get you, and there is some misunderstanding in this regard. We definitely do not want our ban, the upliftment of the ban after the servers have been shifted. We definitely want, as soon as we really want to enter the market and ensure that people get their wages back. So, in regards to the time constraints you've mentioned in this regard, we do have. This is a general presumption that we come forward today, is that there will take a 1 or 2 year, but we definitely will assure you at this point of time it will be done as soon as possible and as speedy as it can be at this point of time. And I can assure you that, because this is the prime concern, and I really wish to say that this is something that we want. We want our app back, we want the servers there, we've agreed this much. So this is something that is not a problem, but we definitely do not want any glitches in future. That is why, for save, it was a kind of a maximum limit that we've provided to the government, but it will be done as soon as it happens. But in regards to that, there were few questions in regards to the investigation that the government side will be conducting. I think they were unaddressed. If they could be addressed first, and before that, I really want Shikhar to address some of the concerns.
Right. So I think that part, the ban, the rescinding of the ban part has already been clarified. Coming on to the second part, when you say the deal which Iranian government and the Singapore government is taking or is going to take place, till that time, the deal shouldn't take place, and before that, the shifting of servers should happen. Is that so? About that, I would just like to ensure you, once you have clarified that the app is not leaking any information, then there is no question of leaking information in the future, since your committee as well as the database administration is taking a quick check of it, immediate check of it, and at no point this can happen. This is ensuring, and this firewall has been created for that purpose itself. So for that matter, if the data center is situated at Singapore or in Razad, data leak would not happen. This is the kind of leverage which we were giving to you. And I think if this may clarify, then we can move ahead.
Right.
If Mr. Bahuguna has something to add to this.
Right. I think in the same respect, it's pretty clear to us. I think we are okay with the idea that, you will be pushing for as much as sooner as you can. And we understand that there are some logistical barriers, which even if we push for as soon as we cannot do so. At the same time, we understand that this might happen otherwise, but the problem that I was trying to address here is this. Earlier, with respect to your time constraint, it looked like you're hell-bent upon, transferring this entire deal within 1 year. Now that I have this clarification, I think it makes far more sense that you will be pushing for it as soon as possible. Secondly, I think with respect to data oversee and data, our control upon the data, I think that's far more than reasonable, and we are ready to accept that as well. Thirdly, with respect to when does this ban get uplifted, I think now the discussion comes to this part. If I am on the right page, Mr. Leo, then we could move ahead.
Yeah, just before that, since we are discussing about the servers and reallocation of server, we really wanted to pitch in the idea of the financial cost that we've brought forth before the start of the negotiation, and my counsel have already laid bare the details that how we wish to go ahead with that. In regards to that, we'd like to hear your viewpoint and then add on to that.
Sure. I don't think it's really a problem with respect to the financial constraints, and I'll tell you the rationale why we won't be indirectly funding everything that comes with respect to this transfer. We understand that policy decisions with respect to laws occur repeatedly and continuously within every government, every year, and probably in every month, specifically if it's a building democracy. We understand that policy change does happen, and these policy changes definitely incur some costs upon the company which are being affected by it. But at the same time, this rationale does not fit in that government must be sponsoring for the same in the first place. Because at the time of this also implies that government will be directly utilizing this entire activity to favor certain amount of countries with certain aspects. I think the amount of signal that this sends, if government, just a moment, if the kind of signal that this sends within the market and how companies and the role of government is being perceived, I think that this does send certain amount problematic signal that government is being a bit more interventionist than it is supposed to be. But on the contrary, I have a proposal that might solve your issue at hand as well, and probably reach a far more negotiable ground in the first place. With respect to that, we think that you consider that 30% can be delivered immediately. With respect to the 70% is your concern. I think that the 70% can still be given out by the government as a loan, and therefore, towards the end of the day, if the loan is fulfilled in the longer run, you can have a longer period of time, things such as 3 years, 4 years, or probably 5 years, which fulfill your loan, and thereby we'll be able to transfer this entire idea, and we'll also have low rates of interest, which absolutely facilitates this transfer. Because as much as this transfer is important to you, it's also important to us. We understand that, and yeah, please, Mr. Liu.
Yeah, I totally get you from where I really appreciate the offer given by the government at this point of time, because we are in need of something that concrete as this. But I'd like to quickly make a counter offer in this regard. Since we are shifting servers at this point of time, we definitely have to go through some infrastructural changes at this point of regard, and definitely in that infrastructural regard, we were trying to, as it is in the best interest of the government, we were thinking on those lines that if we are going to consider Razadi companies' involvement in this, so if government could bond the share of 70% in that regard, and we'll be considering Razadi companies for that regard, and making Razadi companies a technological partner in this regard, so that also serves the purpose of the government in this regard, and also benefits us in this regard, also giving the technological advancement, much needed advancement needed by the Razadian side. And I want Shikhar to add on to these points.
Exactly. In a very brief, I would just like to make this offer more extendable. That how about this? If this offers of 70s to 30%, in which your companies, your own companies, are getting tied up with a company like DataFest, which is an international market, right? And on that basis, those domestic companies are also getting the highlights of those international market, and on that basis, getting their shares added in that economy of Razad. Then I think nothing like it. I think it's a very great offer. Looking at the economic scope of Razad right now and at the level which Razad is right now, I think if you can just let us know about this.
Right. Just like few clarifications with the same aspect. So the kind of deal that we're talking about here, does it address the formation of a subsidiary, or does it talk about that the same company, that DataFest, will have certain amount of tie-ups and sharing of equity with Razadian companies? Just a few clarifications, and I have a follow-up question, Mr. Liu.
We do not wish to go into the details of a subsidiary company. We do not wish to address or make a subsidiary corporation in this regard, but these are some sort of tie-ups so that the Razadian companies could benefit from the technological advancement that we have. And as Shikhar has clarified, that we are in an international market, so definitely they'll benefit more than that.
Right. With respect to that, I think that the problem that here is aspect the same is that to reach a more conclusive, a mutually beneficial result, we also need to understand that to address our understandings and address our constraints as well. A directly interventionist policy by the government, which provides unfair leverage to certain private entities to create certain amount of policy changes to facilitate that the same. Just a moment. Create certain amount of unreasonable precedent with respect to how other companies are viewed in the same. We think that the policy implications of the same are creating unfeasible, circumstances for us to follow this. But with respect to the same, I think we can definitely move towards, providing you a lesser amount of loan, like probably the same amount of loan on far lesser interest and far longer time. We can definitely discuss upon it. If not, it's still an either or situation. Or government ends up, or if the company ends up saying that you will float equity, and government will end up acquiring 20 to 10% of the like 20% of the equity on part of the company DataFest, so that we are also able to be sure that this mere tie-ups, which may or look, the tie-ups are still a gamble, which may or may not result or manifest into any tangible benefits to the companies that we're talking about. If you are addressing the question of tie-ups, let's not bring it around the idea of equity. This directly correlates to the money will eventually stay within the country, and therefore the government will directly benefit through it. And therefore, I think this will create far mutually beneficial idea. And with the same, this also solves the first construct that I was trying to like to tie down the entire thing. That the first aspect that I was addressing to, government's unfair intervention within market. Once this become a partly owned government entity, this also provides us the reasonable justification to provide the amount of money that you need with respect to the transfer that happens. If this proposal seems fine, we could move ahead with it. Mr. Leo.
Yeah, just adding on to that. Firstly, we definitely are not pressing on the fact that government will be favoring some companies. We definitely, in this regard, are encouraging government to. We'll be looking for better companies and those companies that have an aptitude in this field. But we were expecting of the government to encourage those companies to have a tie-up in this regard. But since the government has mentioned about the equity that the government want in DataFest, we can assure you at this point of time is that the equity that you've asked at this point of time, it will be only in regard to the Indian operations, and that will be that is something 20% is very ahead of time, and we can tell you that we have to come down to 7% in this regard, and plus the tie-ups are something that will cover up for that. If Mr. Baugina, yeah.
If I can take just a moment's time and address one of the few clarifications that I had in my mind, I believe Mr. Bahuguna in the first aspect only put up this question about the subsidiary because he wanted to know if you are floating a subsidiary, and then we could ask an equity in that regard, right? The India operations that you are mentioning, Mr. Leo, is with respect to a subsidiary, right? You would have to form a subsidiary to enter into India and subsidize. I mean, carry forward your operations. Otherwise, there is no point of making a booyah India. Otherwise, because there has to be a company formed under the laws of India, and then only we could ask for an equity. Mr. Bahuguna, if you have something to add there.
Right. On that point, I think it's like completely crystallizes the point that I was addressing. Understand that towards the end of the day, there has to be some benefit that the government is able to reap out of the same. Sure, we understand the idea that you are allowing other companies, to form a tie-up with Booyah and therefore end up gaining some amount of profits. We still think that at best is a gamble on our part. What we need is a definitive answer from you. Therefore, we provide some equity. With respect to that, if Mr. Leo is okay with creating a subsidiary, which is fine, I think we can definitely talk about that creation of a subsidiary, which will be owned, I think 20% on part of the government, and rest will be owned by Mr. Leo's company at the DataFest in Allen, in the other country, Alenia, and on the same idea, just to clarify this entire aspect. And on the same aspect, this should, to a certain extent, happen with respect. If this is happening to a subsidiary, I think that's fine. If it still happen, like we are ready to negotiate on the equity share. If it happens to the main company itself, we don't think that we are truly like addressing the same idea. I think we have to be like clear on that front. If Mr. Liu can clarify.
Yeah. So the first question that you posed to me was in regards to the subsidiary. So there was a kind of misunderstanding from the other side, if I can sense that. So firstly, we do not want it to form a company in this regard, a subsidiary company or a corporation.
Just a sec. But because the reason why this happened, just a brief addressal to the same. The reason why this happened because you explicitly mentioned India operations.
Yeah, I get you.
Not exist per se.
Yeah, let me complete in this regard. So I get you in this point. The equity comes from that very point. But since you've already made an offer that tie-ups is not something that you could benefit from, so the second offer that came from our side is that we will agree to the equity share of, definitely for that equity share, that was something that was implied from our side, but definitely it was misunderstanding on the part of the other side. So definitely we wanted to clarify in this regard that equity share will be provided in in regard to the India operations, for that we can form a subsidiary company. So that was the second stand that we took after government provided us with a few details after bonding the cost for the very same. So that equity shares is something that we can negotiate at this point of time. But before that, I'd like to ask government, Mr. Bahuguna in this regard, that all this discussion is taking in the backdrop of the fact that government is going to bear the cost in some regard. So that is something that is happening in
Right.
that backdrop.
Right.
So,
I think this is a fair. Like, just to address this, then we can conclude and move on to other things. Just to address this, I think yes, I think the implied understanding was completely clear that we will bear certain amount of cost to the same, but at the same time, we still not really like agreeing with the 70% of this entire idea. Sure, coming to that, but at the same time, we assure you that we will definitely bear 50% of the same, and 50% if it is borne by the company, we are done with it, provided Indian subsidiary of the same application is formed. With respect to that same subsidiary, there is 20% equity which is held by the Indian government. Therefore, the necessity I'll be proving in to a certain extent that the government is able to engage in criminal and other data protection cases directly against the company, because status quo, this company is foreign registered company. It cannot engage in direct consequences as we can when the subsidiary is formed. I think this will serve a dual interest towards the longer run.
I totally get you in this regard, but there are certain guidelines that comes with a subsidiary corporation in this regard. So something as good as giving away certain stuff to that subsidiary will not be allowed. It will be completely in a managerial capacity, but with certain improvements in future, we can definitely include certain things in that regard. So we definitely.
If I have a clarification on my end, because I could not understand the managerial aspect of it, because if you mention, if Mr. Leo, if I got that correct, please correct me if I'm wrong. If I got from your statement is that the India operations of Booyah app, right? The India operations of Booyah app necessarily entails the India managers, the India users, the India economics, the India finances, everything related to Indian and I mean the Razadian citizens here, right? So if the subsidiary is only formed to appoint managers, there is no lucrative opportunity that we have here. Mr. Boguna, if you'd like to add something to my understanding.
Yes, sorry to interrupt you here. I think there was a
Just wait.
misunderstanding in this regard. So we definitely agree. We definitely know the functions of a subsidiary company in that regard. I was just enumerating certain guidelines that can be given to a subsidiary company so that they follow the company policy. So that was something that was I was going to press throughout.
Yeah.
But I think this is something that is clear in this regard.
Right.
And in regards to the financial cost, we really wish government to uplift that to 60% at least in this regard.
If this can happen.
I think the best that we will be pushing to is 55%, and I don't think like we'll be pushing beyond that. If that's acceptable, let's seal the deal at this moment.
So I'll say
it's
yes.
55 is to okay. It's
Going forward, I'll just summarize what we have done here, and a historic landmark agreement that we have entered into is that the Booyah app will open a subsidiary in India, right? And the Booyah India will be 20% owned by the government. The sole objective behind that is, as and when if there's a privacy breach or something, we could launch a criminal investigation into the same, or prosecute the company under the Razadian laws. That is the sole purpose of it. We do not want to take into consideration users' data or something if that's a concern on the part of any parties there. With respect to the 55% operation cost borne by us, we have accepted on the same that 55% operation cost will be borne when we are relocating the servers here, and there will be supervisory role that we will be given after the relocation as well. That is what we want to clarify as well. If that's agreeable, and I believe this is a good deal that we are reaching here, we could move to the other aspect of operations here. Mr. Shekhar, if you want to address something on that regard.
So I just wanted to clarify that DataFest is already a Razadian.
Just before that, Shikhar, if you could summarize, because there were some network issues in that regard. If you could summarize that for me, just a moment. There were some issues. If you could first do that, and then.
Indeed. So as we have just made a deal that how we can make a Booyah app as Booyah company as a registered company in India and in Razad. Apologies for that. And with that, we can manage the operations in this regard also. Therefore, I would just like to say that we are moving on with a nice pace, and if we can talk about the tax rebates, which when the Booyah app comes into the market of India, we can receive.
Right. I think we are done with the deal with respect to the transfer of this entire act, with respect to the transfer of data servers. What implications will it follow? That I think we are done with half of the discussion that we're supposed to be here for, and the latter half is with respect to what happens after the ban has been lifted. At the same time, uh, right. So before that, let's see when the ban gets lifted is something that we just wanted to address in brief.
Yes.
I think the conditions that we still have is on the basis of accepting everything that you say, considering that you still give us the ownership of the the administration thing, and everything that you talk about still remains the same. We think that if at the moment we cannot confirm that the activity, whatever is going on, is safe in nature, we still cannot tell you that we'll lift the ban. So what we wanted to say, just a moment, we think that the report will come out pretty soon, and as soon as the report comes out, we'll definitely lift the ban. If this is something agreeable, then we can agree with it and move forward.
If I just wanted to add, when we say this ban should get uplifted, it can also happen from our end. This is a proposition if you just want to take it or not. Proposal that on temporary basis this ban should get uplifted. In the meanwhile, the investigation is already going on, and if that whole the investigation report comes out in a conclusive manner and some glitch is found on our side, then you can put a permanent ban on it. But this temporary ban should for a temporary period, this ban should get uplifted.
If I may
On that
address,
idea,
Mr.
please,
Okay,
Rhythm.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I may address the concerns raised by Mr. Shekhar here, I believe the first and foremost point that we are, as a government, we are concerned about our citizens and public image both in the first place, right? If we today uplift the ban and tomorrow if we go forward and find an adverse report in during the investigation, the public message that goes out from our side is that we in our own interest or maybe in conflict of interest in collusion with the company allowed them to operate for a brief period of time, and whenever their whole work is done they left and we banned them. This is not
If
something that we would want going
To
forward.
add on that,
Yes.
add on that. I think this idea of temporary removal of ban seems very inconsistent with the principle why ban exists in the first place. If just
if
to
I may
draw a
just
normal analogy, just
right.
a normal analogy, Mr. Shekhar will conclude this engagement
I think
pretty
we
soon.
are totally going on the wrong line. That's why. I'll just tell
Indeed.
you.
All right, definitely. Then please.
Right.
With respect to let's keep it a tete-a-tete. ASAP back and forth
Exactly.
questions so we can clear
Sure,
it out.
sure.
Please. Clarification.
So when we say this temporary on a temporary basis, this ban should get uplifted. I mean, a proper scrutiny of this app should take place. If we are found guilty, no temporary ban should get uplifted. But on this temporary basis, this scrutinization of this app should take place,
Right.
which will take at max a week, because already we are aware of your laws that how at times and time and again you have banned the apps, and on that note our app if has gotten banned, and I think we should get a 1 week of time and we can just fill out the all the irregularities which you have and you get satisfied with them, then definitely you can go for it. Also I just wanted
to address this,
yeah,
just to confirm this.
just
Please.
one last point. If that firewall, which is firewall construction is not something a major task, it gets constructed on the basis of the some tech savvy people working together. At the same time, this can also be there, and these database administration people who are keeping an eye on it on a supervisory note, not something we are giving any such rights to them, but on a supervisory note, the government people will also keep an eye on it. So I think there's no issue in it if on a temporary basis is getting done.
If I may chip in a word, I think yes. I think you explaining the part why we should be incentivized to do the same is completely justified on your part. But at the same time, this incentive does not address the concern that we're trying to raise here. The concern is that the temporary scrutiny that you're trying to address in this place is already happening to the independent investigation that we had earlier agreed to. At the same time, even if I think what you try to address is a prima facie scrutiny with respect to how these things are going on, what the operation looks like. We think that this prima facie agreement or this prima facie scrutiny can happen, but I think 1 week time is absolutely restrainable with respect to how this scrutiny will truly understand. I think if 1 month time is given, this prima facie scrutiny will take place, and I think in certain period of time we can, after the final report is out, we can finally hit the deal as to why is it happening. So I hope 1 month period time to the prima facie scrutiny is good enough, because I understand,
Only,
calculating.
right.
Right.
If that can happen, because we know the time and reputation are some things which are at stake right now, and
Right.
as soon as possible we can expedite this whole process.
Yes.
And we can definitely, we have already agreed upon the India Razad operations which will take place once the data center gets shifted. I think we have already worked on it. So as far as I can see it, our issues and interests are in line right now, and we were just going to come on. Yeah, sure.
Just before that, I want a certain clarification in this regard. Since we've agreed to a 1 month time period for a temporary upliftment of the ban, we
One
really
month
wish.
time period. Just a moment. 1 month time period of scrutiny,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
Then the ban getting lifted up.
yeah.
If
lifted
I
you,
the
please.
report is not adverse, this is
Yeah.
Right.
my
Yeah,
proposition.
yeah. So we really wish to know the time period till the time the report will be out, and we really wish to get the copy of that report, a detailed copy, so that we get to know everything in detail. The time
As
period as well, if you could
as
clarify.
we mentioned, it's about a 1 month time period at best that we are telling you of the investigation or the scrutiny going forward, and post that the report will be out, and that the same will be shared with you as well, Mr. Leo.
So the whole investigation will be taking period for a one.
The scrutiny, the prima facie scrutiny that Mr. Shekhar told about, that will be taking. However, once the ban will be lifted, the investigation will go simultaneous to the the operation of the company, right?
So
Is that
I was my basic question was in regards to the total time period that the investigation will be consuming in this regard. The total
Right.
time period.
I
Uh,
think, I think, if I could answer, if there is something else Leo wants to add. All right.
nahi, yeah.
All right. With respect to that, I think the total time period becomes I don't think it really carries any utility in this immediate concern, because I think your immediate concern was this app to be allowed back into the market, which I think is anyhow happening within the prima facie scrutiny of 1 month. Which is to say that even if this investigation takes 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, I think this is a loss that we are incurring and a risk that we are taking, that we are allowing a problematic application, which may be problematic, to function within this entire spectrum. So I think this risk has been borne by us, and your app will be back within the market within 1 month, and I think that's far good enough a deal for us to make with respect to
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we are same. We are on same lines to that, and I really wish Shikhar to take the discussion forward. If
just
Just to
just
summarize before the discussion goes forward, just to summarize what we've reached here is that we've agreed on the fact that the investigation will take place. However, a prima facie scrutiny will take place, that is for a period of 1 month at best, and then the report will be out. If the report is found to be adverse, the app will be permanently banned. However, if the report is not adverse, we will not ban the app and lift the ban up. Right, the investigation will go simultaneous to that, and then we could move forward. Now, moving towards the next agenda, and I believe Mr. Shikhar and Mr. Yin would also be very
I have some.
yes, please address.
Uh, yeah, with respect to the agenda that we are moving forward to, I think it's fine what Rhythm is addressing in the first place. I'm really sorry, Rhythm, I cut you off at that moment, but
Not a
still,
problem.
let's continue. I think by this time, we are pretty sure on when this application is getting back into the market, and we're pretty sure that the management is getting back into it. I think there's just few concerns that we had to address post the ban is uplifted, post the company is into the market, and post the entire systems is reinstated. The problem is that at this moment in time, individuals think that due to the pandemic and other things happening, their jobs have been lost. And I think that there's considerable amount of people that the Data Fest in general has laid off during the pandemic time and during the time that it was not in India, not in Razad. So what we wanted is an assurance that towards a certain extent, these individuals will be reinstated, that towards a certain extent their salaries of individuals who have lost their problems will be given back, considering the idea that it's something that has to be come at a cost of addressing our policy issues as well, so that we can understand this entire thing.
yeah, I totally get you. We'll be just before clarifying some of the points and then coming to the issue. We'll be firstly talking about the wages and all those structure that you've mentioned. But in relation to that, the second aspect we really wish to discuss at this point of time was in regards to the communication channels between the other foreign investors and the government. That will be the second consideration we also wish to discuss. But firstly, focusing on the issues that you've raised up. We really, when we come to the market, obviously our prime concern would be to reinstate those employees, and definitely that is something that can be expected of a company. But in regards to the wages and the things that you've mentioned in that regard, we really want to expect a tax rebate that we've been given from 2015 to 2020 to continue that in future. If government could press on that point, we really wish to have a 20% tax rebate in that regard. And before that, I think Mr. Shikhar to give a elaborate point of view, and then you can go ahead, Mr. Baguna.
Right. If I'm audible clearly and visible clearly.
Yes.
Sure. Thank you. So the tax rebate which we are asking for is a 20% tax rebate, since you also know our financial situation right now. And on that note, we want this tax rebate for 2 years for the time being. If you have some reservations on that, because we also want to, reinstate our employees. We want them to give back their salaries which they couldn't get for so long, and even increment if possible, as well as we want ourselves to flourish in the market. So if you can be so generous enough and grant us this 20% of rebate for the time being.
Right. I think with respect to the same, I think just to clarify, the tax rebate that we're talking about comes at the cost that you will be marginally increasing the salary of these individuals, comes at the cost that you'll be reinstating every other individual that exists with regards to the same, right? If I could get a nod so I could understand and move ahead.
Surely. Those 8,000 employees and 42,000 employees, I think you are having a track of them also, right?
Sure. So at the same time, I understand that the tax rebate is necessary. There are two things that you need to discuss with respect to the tax in the first place. Firstly, with respect to how long this tax goes on, and we'll tell you why we think that this goes for a certain period of time. Secondly, with respect to the quantum of the tax that we're talking about, I think the quantum of the tax with 20% is far higher. I think this was significantly different at the time when we were allowing these kinds of things to exist in the first place. But at the same time, considering that we buy in 20% of your tax rebate in the first place, the earlier situations have to go back to how they were. I think if you can recall in the first place, during the time that Rizad was allowing a 20% or whatever tax breaks that existed, there was heavy investment on parts of Data Fest with respect to how it invests money or infuses capital within the economy of Rizad in the first place. So we think that if the company gives us a word that towards a certain extent you will invest into the startups of Rizad, allow and continue the infusement of money, we think that we will be good with allowing a 20% tax rebate. If that's fine.
Yeah, I'll tell you something in this regard. That is something that the company really wish to flourish in the market of Rizad, and we can give you a word in this regard. But before that, in relation to that, this is something I think Rizad government is clearly pressing on the fact that they really want that foreign investors should invest in Rizad, and company like Data Fest and other companies like Five Pence are already there. But in that regard, there were a major concern that were brought by those companies. Since I am the president of the
we would address the same, Mr. Leo.
We would address the same.
Aware of the same, the chamber and the committee that you are the president of. We would address the same. However, we want to address the tax rebate first, and with respect to that trade-off, we want to address the investment from your side in the Rizadian startups and your participation in the Make in Rizad program as a whole.
Right. So adding to that, just a moment. I think your concerns are completely legitimate, and this is also something we had on our table to discuss. At this moment, what we want you is a final word to seal the deal. That just to clarify how it is. That 20%. Just a moment. Right. Really sorry to cut you off there, but just to confirm it on our part, 20% tax rebate goes through. every individual that you're talking about will be that you've laid off will be reinstated. Marginal employment increase, marginal salary increase comes through. Investment in Make in Result campaign will continue to happen. You will continue to invest in startups as you have done for the past period of time. And we think that we will be giving you this tax rebate for a period of, I think, if I may consult with my counsel, I think this will be at best, I think, 3 years to 2 years, depending upon how it goes. And therefore, if we are agreeing on this, then we can definitely move on to the council issue and investors issues.
Mr. Leo, if
Mr.
you could
Leo,
give
if
the
you could.
word.
Yeah, so previously also the government mentioned that the tax rebate was for the first 5 years. If the government could consider Mr. Bahuguna could consider the very same aspect and give us the very same rebate for the first 5 years, that will be completely comfortable from our side.
Mr. Leo, I would address the law aspect of it because I mean, Mr. Baguna, I wouldn't, want you to stress upon the law aspect of it. The law after your entering into the economy changed, and we as a government could not even at one time we could only give 2 years tax rebate for a time being. However, upon consideration in the later years, and depending on the relations that we are forging today, I mean the strong relationships that we have today, I believe going forward after 2 years we could extend the same. However, at point like this, we could only give a two-year rebate according to law. That is my job here to advise my client here as well.
So I totally get you.
If I could add on, I think just a moment. I think I'll make this offer far more lucrative than what law that Rhythm has pronounced. I think the best that we can offer right now is to say that we will definitely give you the 2 years minimum at least. And if the investment continues to flow in your investments continue to benefit our company and the startups that we're talking about, I think I give you my word that this extension will go through, and the extension will happen with respect to 4 years or 6 years as per your performance considers. I think it's fair for me to ask that this tax rebate must be dependent upon the performance that you give. If that's fair, then we can agree on this.
Just before that, I'd like to clarify, since you've mentioned the aspect of investment that will be, flourishing in Resort, in regards to that, that is something that I've already given my word to, that this investment will continue in future. But we definitely need this tax rebate for the maximum period of 3 years at least in this regard. And definitely we can sort out things in future itself, and that depends upon the other investment coming in. The government should consider if we could bring in other companies that are going to invest in Resort, and that is something, a consideration that has to be given by the government itself. So if that goes on your side, we are ready to go. And I will before that, I think
Right.
Leo, if I can address the 3-year aspect of the law, the tax rebate that you're asking, we really as a government believe utmost in the laws that we have framed in the parliament and everything. The law specifically prescribes 2 years, and we can't, the best we could give you offer right now is 2 years, and after that we've been assuring of Mr. Bahuguna has also assured you of the fact that depending upon performance you will get tax rebates in the future as well. Mr. Bahuguna, if you have to anything add.
Right. I think as important your word is within this context, let's keep law out of this entire picture. Assuming that for your best interest, assuming that law does not exist, law is not a constraint in this immediate matter. The larger constraint that I'm trying to address in this picture is with respect to the performance of the investment that comes in. I think if your investment performs, I think we'll definitely reinstate the tax rebate in the longer run. And I think this will definitely go forward to not just 2 years, probably 4 years, and probably 6 years, depending upon the company works. I still don't understand or the compelling reason why we should. Right, please.
Just a clarification, we are going to invest in companies. So how is this going to affect the performance? So we as a company is going to invest in certain companies. So what are the performance aspect that you are expecting from us? Because we could show our performance in Booyah and other things. But what about the companies that you mentioned? If you could clarify the very same for me.
Right. I think the investment that we're talking about, startups is one of those examples. The idea is that if there is certain manifestations of the benefits that we see out of those investments is happening, that those investments do come on time, it is something which is being mattered in a regulated framework, then we're definitely cool with it. I think that these are the compliances that we believe that in general considerations do follow through. And this is the reason why we are saying that if you follow the law, if you follow 2 years tax rebate, if you follow the 2 years rule, and everything happens as it normally happens everywhere, you will probably get through and get another tax rebate in the other sense. If you could address, there are other resources that we have.
Yeah. I think that I think we are good to go, but something as good as 3 years were beneficial for me. But since I'm not aware of law as such. So I think if government is pressing on the fact of 2 years, so we are good to go and we can definitely negotiate in future. So before moving on to that, I'd like to deliberate upon the channel issue, and I briefly ask Shikhar to just enumerate certain points in this regard, and then we can go on further.
Certainly.
Over to you, Shikhar.
Much for this opportunity. I just wanted to, introduce that how Mr. Lioyan has lately been the president of this association, which is an association comprising of the companies or the major companies who are, holding the major shareholders in the Alanian market source as well as in the international market sphere. Therefore, Mr. Lioyan is of the view that since we are entering into the Rezardian market as soon as it is possible, we can also get on with the relationship which Mr. Bahuguna shares with the Alanian companies. If that can also get reconsolidated, and since on this negotiation table, we are making some major steps, and this can also prove to be a stepping stone towards that relationship which Mr. Bahuguna shared.
I think due to some internet error, I just missed out on the most important crux of your discussion. If you could just reprise me of the same in as brief as you can,
Sure.
so I could
Sure. So if you could hear that how Mr. Lioyan has become the president of the association, and on that basis, Mr. Lioyan wants to consolidate the relationship which you share with that association, and that association's relation should get consolidated. If Mr. Lioyan can.
Yeah, just to add on to that point, since government has taken such a major step in banning booyah in first place, so there were some apprehensions in regard to various other companies that they have certain uncertainties. This instilled a lot of fear in this regard. So we definitely demand a good communication channel between the government and these foreign companies, so that the companies are intimated of various facts and the various understandings that the government is taking in regard, and the various steps that government are formulating, so that there are no ambiguities in a further sense, and everything remains clear to the companies itself if there are further restrictions or further allowances that are given in that regard. So that was something precisely our point.
True. I completely understand that the apprehension on part of Mr. Lioyan that there must be some amount of channel communication which directly addresses these things. But at the same time, we must also understand that as soon as these situations happens, things such as you coming across things as large and as urgent as data profiling and individual profiling and mining happening place, we think that our urgent decision on that front was absolutely justified, and this can happen in situations wherein matters of such grave importance are addressed. But with respect to the communication, I think it's fair. We'll definitely establish that communication with the committee. But when we talk about the committee with respect to the same, I think there has been some governmental addressal to the same in the first place. We're also forming a committee which is going to basically supersede the discussions of what this committee is basically taking place, which is to say that whatever decisions that come out of this entire committee will always be subject to the approval of the committee that we are forming in the first place. The propositions of the same will be addressed by Rhythm, so that he could apprise you of how do we plan to go ahead with this. Rhythm, please.
Certainly. I believe there might be some sort of miscommunication or misclarification. I mean, Mr. Bahuguna, in his best of interest, tried to clarify what this committee is going to do. I might just take some explanation to the next level and, apprise you of what this committee is going to do. The government has formed a committee to oversee the Alanian companies' entry into India, investment into India, right? And Mr. Lioyan here is the president of that committee, of one such committee, the Alanian Investor, I believe, Association is the name of that committee, and he's the president of that. What the government is right now doing is, as on the governmental front it always does, is to secure the interest of the Rezard and Rezard's economy as a whole, and it has formed a committee that will supersede this Alanian Investor Association that the Mr. Lewis is president of. However, we assure you that there will be efficient communication between both the committees, and your point of anything, for example, 5 pence, investing some kind of money into India, into Rezard, or any other kind of concern will be addressed duly, and you will be heard on that respect. However, the super session will be there because Rezard's government holds the entire key to entry into Rezard as a whole. If there's any clarification, if you need.
just a few clarifications in this regard. So we basically need to ask you about the representation in the committee. Who all going to be the representatives of the committee, and what are the communication, like the supersession in which regards that is going to happen? Because something as good as association of these companies is something that we wish to remain, but we really wish to know the aspects in which this superseding is going to happen. Just a few pointers.
Certainly. For example, the composition. Let me address the composition part of it first of all. The composition will be various government officials coming from, the Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of Shipping, the Ministry of Trade, every other, corporate-related ministry, corporate affairs even. All of these secretaries coming forward and, forming a committee for better investment opportunities in the country of Razad from the country of Alania in the first place. With respect to the super session, I mean, the first and foremost important thing is, for example, if you resolve tomorrow to, let a country enter into Razad and Alanian company in particular, we would be, if you could, give the word that this country is going to come into Razad, and now this country should be given tax breaks or a lot of incentives that we give on companies that come to us for the economic benefit of the nation as a whole. We will, subject to approvement of us, the country will not be able to get into the Razad's economy. If I made sense there, or if there's any confusion, please address that to me.
I think my counsel will be in a better position to add on to that. Yeah.
So when we say the super session will take place, can you just bit in a very concise manner? Can you just clarify that how the super session will take place?
Right.
Yes, please go ahead, Mr. Boguna.
Right. This super session that we're talking about is a government function and the government authority that the government is exercising. This is merely information that we are providing to you, that there exists a committee which will exist and which will decide on whatever decisions that you're taking. That's just for the sake of information, that what powers this committee has. There is no question of introducing, representation from larger communities of companies who are working within Razad. This is merely a government body as other government bodies function. And the eventual goal that we had here to mention this, and the point that we tried to drive home, is that your decisions with respect to investment within Razad will be subject to this committee. That's that.
So what will be the representation of Mr. Leoyen in that?
The representation is
just what my counsel wanted to say in that regard. Since it's a body that will be basically functioning in that regard, we really wish that a kind of a representation from our association should be made, so that there is a kind of a link in that regard. And if I could, since I'm the president of that association, if I could be the representative, or any method you have for that representation will be well sorted for.
I think that this representation is an unreasonable want that Mr. Leoyen is talking about. To a certain extent, even if no matter what investments Mr. Leoyen brings into this company, a body which is directly and solely formed for governmental policy implications, such as cabinet, does not allow private individuals to enter into it. That is something which is formed through democratic process. The only purpose that we are reasserting here is that why we brought this committee into this discussion is to tell you that your decisions will always be subject to this. The question of representation does not arise because this is a completely government-owned body and government will be deciding as to what happens within it. The reason is the same, that individuals within this are democratically elected individuals, such as myself, such as individuals of trade, such as ministers of other applications in the same place. So if you're on the same, I think Rhythm has to conclude everything that we've discussed so far. If we would get
no, just a clarification. Since it's a government body, right, and it's a democratic elected body, we are very good to go for that. But the concerns of the association has to be brought before the committee. That is our prime concern.
Certainly.
So we definitely do not understand the mechanism that is going to be put forth in that regard, and that is something that we can agree on future date itself if
Certainly.
we are short of time in this regard.
We just wanted to convey the super session of the committee on the body that you are the president of. This is just one aspect that we wanted to convey, right? If I can conclude, yeah, please go ahead.
This is something that we can discuss in future at this regard, because the main concern for us was in regards to the representation and the communication channel, and I hope, and definitely our councils can conclude whatever we've discussed.
Certainly. Thank you. Mr. Shekhar, if you want to go first, not a problem. Yes,
Thank you so much. I think we are good to disagree on some segments also. So I'll just narrate what are the segments on which we agree today. First one, that scrutiny of the app will take place within a month. With that, a report will come. On that basis, a temporary ban as well as a permanent ban will be decided by the government of the Assam. Secondly, when this whole affair, sorry, I think someone's mic is on right now. Okay. So secondly, when this whole process has been done, the shifting of the server as well as the redefining of the security standards of the server, which is there at Singapore at the moment, has to take place, and this will take place in collaboration with the efforts of government of Resort. With that, we will be we'll be getting signed some NDA forms, which with all the officials which are getting connected and associated with our network. Thirdly, tax rebate of I believe we decided on, Mr. Rhythm. Can you just help me on what percentage did we
20%.
decide?
We've decided on 20% tax rebate.
20%.
Yeah.
On 20% with some riders such as the reinstatement of the employees which had to had to get unemployed due to the ban, and increment in the salary of them. With that,
And
I
also
think
with respect to the investment that you are
Investment
going
that
to,
comes in.
investment in the startups which
investment
you
in
talked
startups
about.
and Make in Razak program as a whole.
Moreover, that whole rebate will take place for a term of 2 years, I believe.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Right. And on that note, if I have clarified all the points, I think
If
the
I can
last
add in one point that you may
exactly.
have missed, Mr. Shikhar, can I
All right,
please?
I'll carry forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful, concluding remark and beautiful summary of whatever has been through. I believe this is a landmark deal that we have reached here, and I believe we welcome Mr. Leo Yin and his company DataFest Limited into the Indian markets after the prima facie scrutiny is done. We would want to welcome them in the Razardian market. However, there is one point that must have slipped Mr. Shekhar's learned mind, that we would want to, after the data relocation is done, we would take the supervisory role in that, and also the equity of the new India operations of data plus 20% will be given to the government. This is one important aspect that I believe you must have
Sure.
missed. Not a problem.
Surely, this was, I think, where I missed it. And on that note, if I can have this is one council to council talk. If I can have your word on it, we can have a joint statement signed here to all the constructives which we have taken place today, and we can go about that. How about
Definitely,
that?
definitely,
Surely.
we can sign a joint statement. However, I believe it is in the interest of the whole nation of Razak that nothing, as I've pitched in my opening statement as well, that a non-disclosure agreement has to be signed between both the parties, and nothing of this meeting should go out right now. I mean, till the time anything concrete is achieved and the ban is lifted, nothing should go out at this point in time, because social unrest and a lot of our government is also facing a lot of public image issues
I get it.
in the past. So non-disclosure
So
agreement is something. Yeah. Thank you.
what we can do is we are striving on an effort to join the hands. We can have the
Yes.
statement at least, right? It's a
Yeah,
joint statement.
we can sign the statement. However, the same statement shall not be released to any other media outlet or anything like that. This is a non-disclosure agreement that I had mailed you on your email as well. In my opening statement, I had mentioned the same as well.
I get that. So I think in the next negotiation, which when we will discuss
If
the
Mr.
last segment.
Shekhar could uprise.
Yeah, please
Right.
go ahead.
Right. Please. I just wanted to know, allow Mr. Shekhar to apprise us of the contents of the same. If he wants to deter it to the other, negotiations where we can come to a far greater conclusion, I think I'm fine with that as well.
I believe there's a paucity of time, and I think
Okay,
Sure.
not a problem.
there are
Not a problem.
various points which both the parties have raised, and I believe there are negotiation sessions that we can hold after this, and we can probably iron out all the creases that are there. With this, thank you so much to everybody, and with this, we come to an end of the negotiation session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Miss Moderator.
Thank you.
You remember the questions? I can read them again as a reminder. Would that help?
I'll put it up in the group as well. I'll put it in the chat as well.
In the chat, great, thank you. Yeah.
It's there. It's there in the chat box.
So I'll go ahead first and then Shikhar can take on. So firstly, talking about the goals and strategies that we've come here and how we plan to go about it. So firstly, our prime consideration was to get back the app in the market in relation to the reallocation of servers. That we've sensed that will be their prime concern, and in addition to that, the security concerns. So we definitely arrived at the fact of a temporary ban upliftment after a period of 1 month. That is something we can we that was something that was great for us. And secondly, in regards to the firewall establishment that they have agreed is something that is more or less a fairer solution for both the sides, and that was something that has to be brought up, because in regards to the security, that is a prime consideration for the negotiation that was happening in the backdrop. Apart from it, the major of as has been asked in the CI to us has been the tax rebates and the communication channel, and we were effectively able to get 20% of tax rebates for the first 2 periods. And also in the CI, it has been mentioned that we definitely have a financial backing, so the investments that we wish to make in future was something that we could have agreed to, and that is something that we agreed. And the communication channel that they were expecting out of us was something that we were a bit reluctant to, because of the fact that there was no representation, because it is a communication channel. So when a communication channels come into being, there has to be both the parties in that regard. So that was something that we really wished to argue, but since we were short of time, we had to conclude on that regard. In regards to the second question, I think if we were, since this negotiation, I could say that this party was very competitive in nature from the parties that we've experienced before, and they were a little more expressive and too demanding from out of us. So if we could have done this negotiation one time before, we could definitely expect a more sort of argumentation from our side. And in regards to the various things, we definitely do not wish that we could have gone to extreme ends in the regards, but that is something that is going to happen, as has always been my stand, that we'll never be satisfied from our performance. Also, we'll be mostly in regards to the third question, we'll be mostly negotiating on the same lines, but apart from the extremities that we came across in this negotiation. And also, it could have been a more structured way, that I personally felt, because there were times that that the other party tried to jump on various issues, but we tried to ask them at various point of time to be at specific issues, because they were kind of a lot expressive. That was my input from the negotiation, and I'll hand over to Shikhar.
Yes, I mean, let's try. Okay, so I think I really agree with what Mr. Liavian said, that the party was a bit too much, reluctant to negotiate and wasn't compromising. With every negotiation which we were making, there were some riders on that, and it was creating an atmosphere of hostility as well as competition. So I realized that if I were to have another negotiation, then definitely I would not go for this party, if that is in my in my hands. Talking about the goals and strategies, I think we were coming with the very clarified goals that we want to resign the ban on temporary basis, first of all, and once they are, coming with a conclusive report, then definitely on a permanent basis. After that, we were of this regard that once we have gone for the liftment of ban, then we can have our servers situated in Singapore, as well as we can shift it over here. But we ourselves came up with this mindset that we want to redefine the security standards of the data center, and that wholly ensures that the possibility of leaking the information in the future gets nullified. But the other party couldn't understand this point, and I think it was a bit technical from our part also. But I just realized that when we are preparing for such a proposition, they should have gotten it in their mind. Talking about the revenue, which we really wanted from their side, that was again we had to agree upon the 50% of revenue. I think that's something which was already there in our confidential information. Coming on to the tax rebate part, I think that was also clarified with this exchange, that we will be providing, reinstatement to the old employees, and some investment will be done by us to the startups. But on that note, they also imposed upon us that how the laws have changed, which we were really not aware of, neither in RCI, neither in the GI, and that laws have changed. So they can't get us a rebate for more than 2 years in the first scope. Second, they, under the garb of this law change, they mentioned that how another committee is getting formed, which is taking over this, or superseding this whole association, which Mr. Liaoyin is a party of. So I think these were some things which were creating clashes, and due to which I realized the negotiation couldn't be reached upon in its truest of the sense. So this was something from my end, but we tried our best that we could have.
I don't have any follow-up questions. Do any judges have follow-up questions about this session?
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I'm just waiting for them to come back and then I'll put you in. Just a second. Hello, ma'am. How are you doing?
I'm
We're
fine,
almost
thank you.
towards the end of it. I'm just waiting for T28 to come out. I'm guessing that they don't want to come out.
Yeah.
Prabhav, just give them a call because.
Okay, if you can just put me in their breakout room, I'll go get them.
No, so I've closed the doors. Okay, let's just wait 10 seconds. They'll automatically come out. Yeah, they should be out now. Did you guys not feel like
join in 5 minutes? He's gone to the washroom.
I'm
Yeah,
not
he's
aware of
back.
it. It's
Yeah,
fine.
he's back.
Yeah.
There we are.
Yeah.
Just a second, just a second. Oh, it's the claimants.
John, I can never get enough of your cameras. They're always amusing. What you do with your...
How did you change your camera in the middle of this? Yeah.
Alternate N. Alternate N. It switches cameras. Like this. Bam.
And yeah, we're good to go.
Boom. And I'm back.
My son
is, my son's my technical guy, but anyway, I'm sorry.
So the participants, the questions are the same. I think you can begin by answering the first one and the second one and the third.
Read it again. Just clear it.
It's supposed to be in the chat box. Can you see them, or you're not the one?
Jessica, you sound like a robot.
In the first slide.
We're able to see the questions. Or can we?
I thought there was. Yeah, I thought it was on my end.
Yeah.
Okay, if you
Shall
can,
we
please begin. Yeah, please begin. Aga, is it clear? Is the net better? Can you hear us clearly? Okay, good, perfect. Please move, Erkan.
Yeah, thank you. We'll just begin with the first question, that is about the goals and strategies that we had coming into the negotiation. I believe the three important and pertinent goals that we had formulated on our end was first to secure the data and the privacy of the Rizardian citizens. The second is with respect to the economy of Rizard and securing the interest of the economic interests of Rizardian economy. And third is with respect to telling the other party that we have formed a committee that will supersede your, the Alanian investor association. The third most important agenda that we had. I believe Tejas would want to address the data privacy and go into depth a bit.
Right. I think on that front, largely with respect to privacy, there were 3-4 constraints that we wanted to talk about. Firstly, with respect to access of data, I think one of the most necessary things mentioned in our confi was with respect to access of data must exist, even if to a certain extent we end up compromising or not being able to transfer the server location. We were also able to land the deal of transferring a very healthy deal with respect to transfer of server location. Also with respect to access of data that we talked about, that they tell us there's large control with respect to how we access data, even though there was certain amount of restraints with respect to some metadata not being able to controlled still by us, but in the longer run they still agreed to the fact that it is always open to us, that we can access them if there are national threats in the first place. Thirdly, I think we were able to bring about the investigation point, which is to say that not allow a very problematic application to directly enter into the market, but give certain amount of time to provide a prima facie scrutiny while simultaneously the investigation is going on. So in the greater run, we are able to secure larger amount of time for for us to be sure as to what this data app is and what its potentials are. Fourthly, with respect to equity, which I think was largely an outcome with regards to how the discussions were going. But I think whatever we secured on the part of equity, direct control and creation of subsidiary was a good enough deal that we landed on. This allows us to engage and keep a check on the mechanism, since our data chest was not a Rezardian company, it was an Alanian company, but now the subsidiary is a Rezardian company. Therefore, we can engage in battles such as criminal battles or directly charge them under the data protection law we have domestically.
Yeah.
That is how we thought, and this is how we went.
Going forward with the second goal that we had on hand is ameliorating the economy of Rezard. We believe we did a fantastic job on that front. That we got two of the main important proposals. That is, getting reinstatement of all the employees that were laid off, and second, increasing the salary of these employees marginally, right? And on the second front, we also secured investments in Rezard, because that was a confi that the confidential information mentioned that the Alania, the Rezardian economy is largely dependent on the Alanian investor companies and everything. So we now wanted them to invest in our own companies, for example, our startups, and more sort of engaging in the whole of. Sorry, is there something?
You can continue. You can continue.
Okay. So this is the second agenda that we had achieved. And the third is with respect to telling them, apprising them of the super session that will take place of the alliance of Alanian investor companies by the committee that the government is going to form. So I believe we were able to achieve the three of the most agenda by a good margin. Can we move to the second question now? Yeah. With respect to if you had to do negotiation over again, what would you do the same? Tejas, if you want to add something, and then I'll chip in.
I think two of the larger things that I wanted to address, and I think were largely lacking on our front. Firstly, with respect to how a lot of some places our talks were definitely overlapping. I think a better ability for us to communicate.
Tejas, this is with respect to what would you do same in the next session as well?
No. This is with respect to what we'll do different. So,
we're talking about the second question right now.
Wait a second. I'll just address.
You can take it in any
I
order.
think you were giving an answer to the third question. There was some confusion to that.
Oh, with this is what would you do same, right?
Yes.
I think the larger things that we were pushing, we thought that we did good with respect to what we would do same, is pushing for a middle ground. I think even though the offers that were made, from the other party, we were able to push a lot for a middle ground, wherein we were able to reinstate the image of as to how the government is being viewed by the society at large, and thereby also allowing certain amount of benefits to what the company wants. Secondly, I think our discussion with respect to our pattern as to how we were coordinating with each other, this is something which significantly improved compared to the last 3 rounds that we were in. We were able to hand over it to each other without necessary need of addressing it in a weird manner.
And one more point, if I could add in, is with respect to the discussion of agenda. We were really impressed by our own effort that we could discuss each agenda individually and move forward, and then only move forward to the next one. Otherwise, what happens is it creates a mess, and a kind of proposals flowing from both the sides and nothing getting decided upon. However, in this meeting and in this session, we actually treaded upon that sphere that we could decide something constructively and then only move forward to the next agenda. With respect to the third question, if you had to do the negotiation over again, what would you do differently? Difference is the word, Tejas. So please take that into consideration.
I think one of the things that we thought at one point in time became a bit glitchy was with respect to how we overlapped each other tones. Even though there was a far better ability on us to delegate each other when to speak and when to not speak, I think at times this area could have been better with respect to when we overlapped each other. And I think there were certain questions with respect to tax law that I ended up answering that I shouldn't have answered. I think this is something, a minor glitch that came about, and I should have been like more cognizant as to what questions are outside the ambit of my professional capacity, and I should have transferred them over to them, but I didn't. So the pressure got onto us.
Yeah, going on the same line, I believe addressing the same issue of the role division, there could have been a mere bit of improvement there, because we ended up answering both of ours not related question to both of our profession, and that was something that was missing on our part. Maybe we could have worked on that better. However, I think the other part is that discussing certain primary agendas first, we did that wonderfully. So believe that would be it. If there's any other question, we would be happy to address the same.
I have one. From where did you get the change in the tax law that said the laws don't allow more than 2 years of rebate?
I believe just to get the parties to agree on a lesser amount, we made that up. That was on our power.
Okay. And would you do that the same again?
No, we wouldn't. I mean, we could have done a better job at that point in time. However, just to get a middle ground on that point, I believe that was my mistake, and I accept that, and I wouldn't want to do that going into the next round. Tejas, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think added following up to that same answer, I think this is something that I identified at that moment in time, but I think I tried my best to mitigate the harm coming out of the same by trying to incentivize them to follow the same act, but providing them a different path or a different reason to do the same. I said that even if those tax laws don't exist, the better way is to give you further extension based upon how your performance is. I think even if those tax laws reason wouldn't have existed, I think the best we could have shifted to was 2 or 3 years, which we don't think would have mattered significantly more. But yes.
So that was a wholly mistake on my part, and I accept the same. If there's any other question.
Shall I move the judges to the breakout room, if that's okay?
I think.
Yes, please.
Just 1 second. I think I'll just I'll close the first one